As a professional boxing trainer, Kerry Farr has worked in the corner of champions and contenders alike. Today, he shares stories of men and women who have been knocked down, but got up and kept fighting to become champions in life. With the next edition of In Your Corner, here's Kerry Farr.
Hello, friends. This is Kerry Farr. Thank you for joining us on In Your Corner today. We have a very special guest with us. I mean, a very special guest. Hall of Fame race car driver and NASCAR legend Darrell Waltrip joins us. Now, Darrell, I want to ask you a question. How in the world did you get started in racing?
Well, everybody knows how I got started in racing, but they really don't. I grew up in Owensboro, Kentucky, a little town up on the Ohio River in the western part of the state, and I was fascinated by go-karts. I was 12 years old, and my dad drove a Pepsi Cola truck. And in the summertime, my job was to ride on the truck with him and deliver, as he liked to say, pop around town. And so we'd stop in his hardware store, and they sold go-karts in his hardware store. I'd go in, and while Dad was he was working, I was sitting on a go-kart, kind of dreaming in my mind what it would be like to actually be able to drive this thing, you know. And so every week we'd go to that store and we'd stop, and Dad would do his thing, and I'd sit on the go-kart. Finally, one day we were in there, and the guy that owned the store, he said, "Your boy loves that go-kart." He said, "You ought to buy that for him." My dad said, "Look, there are 5 kids in this family. I drive a Pepsi truck, and my wife works at the IGA. We can't afford no go-kart." So the guy said, "I tell you what, we're going to be over to shopping center Sunday. We take the carts over there and race them." He said, "Why don't y'all come up there and I'll let him drive it?" Well, I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, it was almost like Christmas. I counted the hours. We went to church on Sunday morning, and I sat by the window so I could see out to be sure it wasn't raining, and it was going to be a nice day so we could go to that shopping center parking lot and I could drive that go-kart. And we got there, and I can't tell you how excited I was. I'd never driven a go-kart. I'd only sat on it. But I'd seen them run these carts on this parking lot. They lay out a course of hay bales. So I knew what to do. I got on that go-kart, and I made a couple of little laps around there, and I kind of got the feel of it, and then I took off. And I went around there as fast as anybody there was going around that track. And I come in, and the man that owned the hardware store told my dad, he said, "That kid's got some talent." He said, we need to get him on one of our go-karts, because he owned the team that raced. He said, "We need to get him on one of our go-karts." That was music to my ears, and that started my career. I got the opportunity to drive that man's go-kart. I won 500 go-kart races. All over Kentucky, Indiana, a little bit into Tennessee. We traveled around quite a bit because he had a race team. So I had a really good reputation for being able to drive a go-kart. I turned 16. I wanted to race cars. I can drive go-karts, but I'm getting too big now. My knees are sticking up in front of my face. I can hardly see where I'm going. So I need to get into a car. So I had a race car before I ever had a driver's license. So my dad and I built a car, a 36 Chevy, and it was number 6. And I was kind of known in the neighborhood as the Wild Child. So it was car number 6 and Wild Child on the side of it. And that was my first race car.
Unbelievable. So you started out in Owensboro, and you were winning stock car races there?
Yep. It was fun. One year they had 18 races at the Whitesville racetrack there in Owensboro, right outside of town. And I won 14 of them. I think I ran second in the other 4. People were tired of me winning in Owensboro. And a man named P.B. Crowell, who lived in Franklin, Tennessee, used to come up and race with us a little bit. They would race here in Nashville on Saturday night. He had great cars. He won championships at the fairgrounds. He won races at the fairgrounds. He was friends with Bobby and Donnie Allison and Red Farmer, and he knew all the Alabama gang. And so PB he was kind of a partier. And he was a multi-car team owner. This was back when nobody even knew what a multi-car team owner was. He had 47, 48, and 49. He had 3 race cars. He ran them at the fairgrounds. They would load up after the race on Saturday night and drive up to Owensboro. It's about a 3-hour drive back then, not a lot of interstates. And they would come to Owensboro. They'd bring their race cars, 3 of them, and a boat. and they go out on the river. The Ohio River's right there, and they go out on the river on Sunday afternoon and ski and play around on the river all afternoon, and then come to the racetrack and race at night. Well, I think they thought it was going to be easy pickings. There's a little racetrack up there in Owensboro, who can't be that much competition there. I kicked their butt every week.
Did you?
They'd come up here, and they had these really nice, slicked-up race cars. I had an old 58 Ford, but it had a great engine in it from Holman and Moody. It had tons of power. And we'd get on that little quarter mile, and I'd just wear them out. Well, PB and I became great friends. And I'd go on the river with them on Sunday afternoon, and we'd go race cars on Sunday night. PB got hurt. He was testing one of his cars in 1969 at the fairgrounds. He was a track champion. Something broke on the car, and the car flipped, and it broke his back.
Oh, my.
And so he couldn't drive his car that year. And he had some friends down here that he raced with that kind of filled in for him while he was trying to recover, but he soon realized he wasn't going to be able to drive again. His back was too bad. So he called me up and he said, would you come down and drive my car? Now, Owensboro, a little quarter-mile track. Nashville's a big half-mile. It's like a super speedway back in the day.
Yeah.
And one of the best short tracks in the country. I mean, they had 2 NASCAR races there, two Sprint Cup races there every year. So this track had a huge following, great reputation. It had 15,000, 20,000 people out there every weekend for the races. It was the only thing in town at the time.
And how many people were in Owensboro for a race in those days?
Well, maybe 3,000 at the most, but probably more like 1,500. On a good night, maybe 3,000. So huge racetrack, huge opportunity. And PB called me up and said, would you like to come drive my car? And I said, oh my gosh. Again, thinking back to the go-kart, yeah. Can I come and drive it? This is one of the best cars your man could sit down in. I came, I drove it, I won. I mean, I won the race in his car, and of course, he was impressed because that was a big step from that quarter mile to the half mile. So anyway, I won, but he had already made some commitments to some other people about driving the car, some more races that year, so I didn't get to drive it every week. But he would call me when he needed somebody. I'd come down. Every time I came, I won. So at the end of the 69 season, the track burned down. I don't think they had a wooden, it was old fairgrounds. You may or may not remember it, but it's old wooden grandstand back in the day in his old fairgrounds.
I came to Nashville about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and so in 69 it burned down. And so in the off season they had to rebuild the whole place. They rebuilt the track, built a new big grandstand, and changed everything. But the season didn't get started until about the middle of 1970. Well, I was all set to drive PB's car, and the first race they had, it was called the Flameless 300. Big race. Guys with Red Farmer and Allison's and guys from North Carolina and from Indiana, everybody came to this race because this huge race paid $10,000 to win.
Yeah.
Took a lot of money back in the day. And so, and I won it. I won that
300.
That 300 lap race. And that just took me to another level because you win at Nashville, you win a local Saturday night race, that's one thing. But when you win a race against that kind of competition, you must be pretty good. And so that just started me off on my career. And I always think about my career as stepping stones: Owensboro, Nashville, Daytona.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it went. I did everything I could do in Owensboro. Then I did everything I could do in Nashville. So then the next progression was to finally make it up to Daytona.
And at that time, you were so successful. You were winning so many races that you kind of were a little bit arrogant, and the people actually didn't like you in those early days.
You weren't out there, were you? You weren't in the grandstands, were you?
I think I read something Richard Petty said about you back in those days.
Richard Petty told me one time. Richard Petty had the longest index finger any man I ever met. He used to poke me in the chest all the time. Boy, let me tell you something. And Richard Petty said something to me one time that resonated with me, and I never forgot it. He said, you might win a lot of races and you might make a lot of money, but you'll never be the most popular driver. Well, you know what I said? Big whoop. I didn't come here to win a popularity contest. I come here to win a race. So just fast forward a little bit. In 89 and 90, I won most popular driver, and I kind of always looked over at Richard and said, well, you didn't know everything. But from the time he told me that to the time that happened, a lot changed in my life, too.
Yeah.
So I wasn't liked, and I was a bad guy. but I kind of cherished that role. I was new in the sport. I was trying to break in. And the Pettys and the Allisons, the Pearsons, the Bakers, the Yarboroughs, that was the establishment. And I was this smart aleck kid from Tennessee that shows up on the scene, and I'm going to kick all of his butt. I mean, that's how I felt about it. And I didn't mind telling them I didn't mind telling them I was going to kick their butt either. And so some fans like that.
You were the Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, well, they like that. Well, Muhammad's from Louisville, right up the road. So yeah. I've been accused of being a little bit like him. But anyway, I just felt I was so confident that I could get the job done, that I could do it. But I didn't start out able to do it. So I couldn't beat them on the track because I didn't have the equipment. But I could wear them out in the media. And they didn't have a chance against me in the media because if they had something to say, I had something better to say. And so that's kind of how I got the reputation of being known as Jaws. I would wear them out on the track eventually, but I could wear them out in the media anytime they wanted to go toe-to-toe. So some people liked that. Some people thought it was cool, and other people hated it. And the people that hated it, they really hated it.
They hated that you were so vocal, you were so arrogant. Muhammad Ali was from Louisville, and you were from just down the Ohio River in Owensboro, Kentucky, and you were a lot like him. They called you Jaws. They called him the Louisville Lip, and you were the Owensboro Jaws, I guess.
Well, one of the things that I was, it was a blessing and a curse. When I came to Nashville and started racing at the fairgrounds, there wasn't any media. I mean, there was Joe Caldwell and Larry Woody.
Yeah.
Larry worked for the Tennessee, and Joe worked for the Banner.
Right.
And and Rudy Kalis.
Yeah.
And eventually Hope Hines, but it was all local,
right.
Kind of local stuff. And so there wasn't any national media like we got today, social media or that thing. So they try to interview some of the other drivers, and other drivers just it's not that I talk too much. Those other guys don't talk any. And so it appeared that I talked more than I had to talk for them. And of course, in the process, I talked about them too. But a little show called Pit Stop down at Channel 5, me, Hope Hines, and Joe Carver, the PR guy at the Speedway at the time, they started a little Saturday morning show, 30-minute show on Channel 5 called Pit Stop. Well, their vision was they would have different driver on every week. Whoever won the feature, they'd have that driver on, and they would interview that driver and find out, what he did that Saturday night to win the race. I won every week.
Wow!
So I became almost a regular on the show, and when I was on the show, we'd have fun, and I really I understood the media, understood that was my chance to talk to the fans, kind of one-on-one. And other drivers, they just would say, "Well, you won this race Saturday night." Tell us about that. Yeah, car run good. Well, that move you put on Fluky, that was a good move. Yeah, that was a good move. And that's all. They just they couldn't add. And it wasn't no disrespect to any of them. They just weren't comfortable in front of the camera, and I was.
Yeah.
And another thing that really helped me was Ralph Emery. Had the all-night radio show on WSM. And when I first came down here, they needed Bill Donahoe, who ran the racetrack, and Pascal Young, and Joe Carver was the PR director. Well, Joe knew everybody in town, and Joe would he'd bring me down here, and he'd drag me all over town doing interviews. And I got to know Ralph, and I loved Ralph, and he became a really dear friend. And I would sit in on his radio shows with him at night because he's there by himself and all night long.
Yeah.
So having a little company was kind of nice. So we became great buddies, Ralph and I did, and he helped me when he had when TNT had the TNN had the Nashville Now, the country music program on TNN. Ralph was the host, and when he didn't feel like doing it, he'd call me and say, "You want to sit in for me?"
How about?
And I mean, this is national. It's cable, but it's national TV, and I'm getting a chance to fill in for Ralph Emery. And I used to do his morning show down at Channel 4. I'd get up at 5 in the morning, go down there and sit with him and Spider Rich and a whole bunch of the guys from the Opry. And
you did everything.
I just had so many great opportunities, and I learned from the best.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed. I'd like to share with people the excitement that I had about driving cars, about racing, and how much fun it was, and how gratifying it was, and how dangerous it is. And and really, I was just, I guess in a lot of ways, looking back, I thought I was helping everybody, but in reality, I was only trying to help myself.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of how it turned out, and I didn't realize it. I think most athletes are selfish. They kind of look out for themselves. You have to.
But there's a certain arrogance that you have to be a competitor, to be a winner.
Yeah, well, I think that arrogance sometimes is confidence and arrogance.
Yeah.
When you're so confident, I knew I could kick those guys' butt every week.
Yeah.
It wasn't a question of if I was going to. It was just that I was going to. And they knew it and I knew it. And so, you can get rather obnoxious when you're in a situation like that.
When you know you're going to win.
When you know you're going to win.
You know, I used to talk to a friend of mine that shot pool about the Bible and said, doesn't the Bible prohibit gambling? He said, well, it's not gambling when I shoot pool. And he said, why? He said, because I know I'm going to win. So that was kind of like
right. Yeah, I'm not gambling.
Yeah, I knew I was going to win.
Yeah.
You knew you were going to win. Amazing. Darrell, I've read about your life and your story in, stock car racing and NASCAR. And there was a time when, you and I talked earlier about, there was a little bit of confidence in you, maybe arrogance, and that rubbed some people the wrong way because early in your career, people actually didn't like you, but later in your career, you became, very popular, one of the, most popular race car drivers. But I think I read somewhere where you said back in the early days that you didn't think you could get hurt in one of those automobiles.
Yeah, well, that's what I told my wife, week in and week out. No, it was racing was dangerous. You could get killed driving a race car.
Yeah.
And I guess I look at it a lot of time. I think, what was I thinking? I didn't mind getting in a car and running 200 miles an hour and hitting the wall, but I was scared of heights. I didn't go snow skiing or water skiing because I was afraid I'd get hurt. And so people couldn't quite put two and two together. How could you be afraid to go skiing and you're not afraid to get in a car? Well, in the car, I was in complete control. And I did, in my mind, think that it would always happen to someone else. They didn't know what they were doing. They took an unnecessary risk. They got themselves in a situation, and that's why that happened. And so I could convince myself and my friends and my wife particularly that it's not these cars. It's guys make mistakes. That's how they get injured. That's how they get hurt. And then in 1983, it happened to me. I'd come off of two of the best years anybody'd ever had in the sport. I won the championship in 81, 82. I won 24 races and 18 poles and everything you could win driving for Junior Johnson in that Mountain Dew car. We were invincible. I mean, you couldn't beat us. So I was at the peak of my career, I guess you'd say, and feeling very confident and never really thought about getting hurt. People around me get hurt. People around me got killed. But I never thought it would happen to me. And then in 83 at Daytona, I was running the Daytona 500, and there was a car slowed in front of me, and it was either hit the car or spin my car out. I spun my car out and backed into a dirt bank with a guardrail. And thinking back, which I had a concussion, so I don't remember a lot about what happened, but it's funny how things come back to you through the years. But I remember I was going backwards at probably 160 miles an hour. I know I'm going to hit the wall backward with the car going back. And I remember, and this happened because I had a similar thing happen to me, and it was like a flashback. But I remember leaning forward because I was going backwards. And as I thought about it, I said, you're leaning forward, you're getting ready to hit the wall backward. What's that going to do to your head? Whack! If I'd have been smart, I'd have been leaning back and waiting for the impact. But
wow.
you don't, it's split second. So you don't have time to think about that. Had a serious concussion. They took me to the hospital, and I came to, and back in those times, they didn't have the technology we have today, so they couldn't test you for anything. You had a headache, yeah, well, take some Tylenol. And I went to the hospital, and I came to, they checked me over, I didn't have any broken bones. They sent me on from Daytona home. And we drove, back in those days, we drove everywhere. So we got in a van, Stevie and I did, and we're driving back to Tennessee. And Stevie said I was driving erratic and not making real good sense, and which is not totally uncommon for me, or that I could be that way. But anyway, so we get home, and the next week is Richmond, Virginia, is the next race. I went to Richmond, Virginia, and raced. I didn't win. I think I finished third. Went to Richmond, Virginia the next week. Then the next week we were in Rockingham, North Carolina for our next race, third race. That race got rained out. We ran a few laps in the Rockingham race and it got rained out. And so we came back the next week to finish the race. And in the time from Rockingham to going back to finish the race, I woke up.
Wow.
I had left Daytona. I didn't remember Daytona. I didn't remember Richmond. And I didn't remember being at Rockingham.
And how many weeks?
The week before. That's 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
So it took me 3 weeks before I finally realized that I'd been basically unconscious for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Raced. People, people weren't aware that there could be something wrong with you then like they are now. And so when I woke up, it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I thought, how could I have done that? How could that possibly have been? And they were telling me about things I did, things I said, and I'm thinking, I don't remember any of that. And so, ironically, some friends of mine, Leonard Isaac and his wife Ann, and they were friends with Dr. Cortez Cooper and Christ Presbyterian Church, First Church downtown. Cortez left there and started Christ Pres. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, until they got a facility built, we met at the Hillsborough High School, or they did. Okay. They met on Wednesday nights because they didn't have a sanctuary or anything. So they met on Wednesday night for a Bible study. Well, all the years that I've been around racing, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a deacon. Yeah. My grandmother's name was Oda Palestine Phillips. And so Oda Palestine made sure that DW was in church. Yeah. Sometimes 3 days, sometimes 3 nights a week, 3 days a week. So anyway, I grew up in a Christian home, and so I was exposed to the Lord, but He was not my Lord and Savior. But when this concussion thing, and I woke up and I finally realized that, gosh, you can get hurt doing this. And I like to say it knocked me conscious. Yeah. Because I was knocked some sense into your head. It knocked some sense into my head. Yeah. And then I met Dr. Cooper, and I love Dr. Cooper. He was the first really minister that would teach from the Bible and could connect me to what he was talking about. And so you gave your life to Christ at that time? In the Hillsborough High School.
Friends, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast on In Your Corner today. And I'd also like to invite you to go to our website at inyourcorner.info, where we always have some free resources there for our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next edition of In Your Corner.